Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and LastPass. Today we're going to rag on it because if you're a LastPass user, congratulations, a bunch of hackers may be sitting on your actual password vaults. Now the reason I'm making this video is not because I'm necessarily too hurt from LastPass, I don't use it to begin with, but I'm trying to defend password managers, okay? Passwords are the most important thing a lot of people have. They're literally the tool you use to sign into some of your favorite web services. Now again, passwords in combination with two-factor authentication is the security we all preach. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you use the same password on multiple websites? Well, you should stop. And you want to know why? Because that is bad practices. Typically, you want to have a different password for each different website you go to. But you're like, but Muda, how am I going to remember all of them? Well, that's what you use a password manager for, okay? That's pretty much the general gist of it. Now, I'm not here to shill for any specific password manager. Just use whatever you want. If all you want to do is use the Notes app on your phone and lock that note down, that's a fine endeavor. I'm not judging you for it. If you want to use a specific password manager, be fine. But use a different password for every different website. One of the largest ways most people get their passwords hacked is not because of some movie brute forcing technology. No, how they usually get hacked is somebody uses the same password across the internet, and whereas that password is pretty secure with a company like Microsoft, because for instance, they're big, powerful, and they definitely have the money to throw for security, so generally when you're giving them your password, they salt these passwords, so they store them encrypted, so even if they are breached and hacked, typically it shouldn't cause too much of an issue. But let's say you use the same password on some forum website, you know, where they talk about video games and basic stuff, and they're using some open source forum software. Yeah, they're probably not going to store your passwords in the best way possible. Some of them may even be storing it in plain text, for crying out loud. And if those sites get breached, congratulations, because you use the same password there that you used on Amazon, Microsoft, Google, whatever big service, people are just going to use that password all around. And in general cases, it may actually work. That's how most people end up getting their shit hacked, through hacked databases. Now that's why you use a password manager, because if you use a different website for every different, site out there, if you use a different password for every single website, you should relatively be safe. Now, big spiel aside, LastPass was probably one of the biggest companies in this game. Password management from everywhere. Life is happening online, work, play, family, and friends. Yeah, these people basically allow you to store multiple different passwords in their one service. Now, typically, all you would need to remember for this is your master password. And I'm going to give some password tips, okay? Use a password that's really, really hard to, really, really long, and one that you'll absolutely remember no matter what. Typically, the best passwords are the ones you couldn't enter in front of your mother, okay? So for instance, this is a password testing service that'll tell you how long it takes to get brute forced. And for instance, we'll enter a disgusting password, okay? Such as coming in, and we'll make coming in all capitals, coming in porcupine anus, all right, and we'll use $ for the anus. We'll add a few numbers like 7689 and then 2 @ symbols at the end. You can see this is a pretty complicated password. You might be able to remember something as filthy and degenerate as this, but if you look at the brute forcing around here, you can see that so many different aspects of this password. For instance, the last section with anus 7689 needs to be brute forced. Typically, some of these first ones are dictionary cracks, but their ranking is so low. In some cases, all of it combined will take centuries to brute force, if anything. But anyways, going back to LastPass, they would allow you to store a, they would basically let you create a password, vault, and you could use that master password to basically be your one password, and then you put that in, and this would store all of your passwords for various different websites. Now, they were breached August of this year. And at the time, according to their own security incidents, for instance, right here, they said August of 2022, while no customer data was accessed during the 22 incident in August, some source code and technical information were stolen from our development environment and used to target another employee, obtaining credentials and keys which were used to access and decrypt some storage volumes within the cloud-based storage device. Long story short, the threat actor was able to obtain a backup of customer vault data from the encrypted storage container, which is stored in a proprietary binary format that contains both unencrypted data, such as website URLs, as well as fully encrypted sensitive fields such as website usernames and passwords, secure notes, and form-filled data. The encrypted fields remain secured with 256-bit AES encryption and can only be decrypted with a unique encryption key derived from that master password, using our zero-knowledge architecture. And of course, zero knowledge, I'm gonna look at their marketing bullshit for a little bit. Of course, you can see this is their architecture. For instance, you got your master password, some two-factor authentication, maybe Face ID, some two-factor SMS or email verification. Then that master password is put through PBK DF2 hashing, which is a password salting algorithm. So salting, for those of you who don't remember, passwords typically when you send them to a service, they are salted, which means they're encrypted, they're filled with salt, so that typically even if they're grabbed, they're typically unreadable to any algorithm or like the human eye. So it's not like if you put your password as password, that is going to be salted, meaning things are going to be put into it. It's going to be, the salt is going to be put into those passwords, is going to be encrypted, and it's going to go through a hashing algorithm that'll make it unreadable. So in this case, it goes through a bunch of algorithms. They've got an encryption key. That encryption key, is exchanged between vaults. And the only thing that exists on their server side, so LastPass, is like an authentication key and that encrypted vault. Generally, your stuff is going to be stored on your system, if anything, your password. They really don't have access to your master password, is what they're saying. Now, okay, let's just get all of the marketing nonsense aside, all right? At the end of the day, according to this service, a bunch of information did get leaked. So you're like, all right, Muda, I'm using LastPass. Have I been hacked? To be honest, I don't know, all right? At the end of the day, it depends on if your vault has made it into the hands of hackers. Now, typically the way that this works is if you have a weak master password, well, what could happen is they could absolutely brute force. Like that demonstration I showed you just earlier, a few minutes ago in this video, if your master password is very simple, or let's say it hasn't gone through 100,000 times of that hashing algorithm, because you may have a significantly older LastPass account, somebody could break into your actual account. Now again, brute forcing isn't something that takes seconds like it does in the movies. Depending on how throttled their actual brute forcing is, or how fast those systems are, and even if you do have a super fast system, you're looking at a time of maybe 20, 30 years. I've seen cases of maybe like 18 hours, but that is in like the best possible case scenario, like you absolutely did not follow any form of password securing algorithms. And that's why I've always said the best passwords are the filthy long ones with tons of numbers and symbols popped in for good measure. Because when it comes to brute forcing passwords, if you had a password like, say, password, for instance, like that's all you had, that exists in most dictionary hacks anyways, where they just literally look at the most common words out there. If you're constantly putting symbols, numbers, uppercase and lowercase lettering, then you literally do break those dictionaries and you enter into the world of where your password is mostly going to be reliant on brute forcing it. And brute forcing, no matter how you cut it, will always be a slow, painful endeavor because there's just so many combinations to go through. Law of simple basic statistics and permutations means the longer your password with the more variants, again, upper, lowercase, numbers, and symbols, makes it just that much more difficult and time consuming to crack. Regardless of whatever hardware you throw at it, at some point, you just reach it just becomes too long to break. And I know Moore's Law is a thing, but again, logically, you're going to be fine if your master password is pretty secure. The other more likelier scenario is definitely if they look through email lists and decide to actually email the infected users, the compromised users, and basically phish them to maybe reset their password through a shady link and capture their master password that way. Who knows? There's a few ways that they could tackle you by doing this. And that's just something that if you ever get a message in the next few months that is from LastPass or something that's addressed from there, check the domain of who sent it. It should be from LastPass's official domain, not some random website. I know phishing attempts have gotten pretty good lately, but just make sure it's coming from the right, proper domain. Regardless of how you want to cut it, LastPass waited a literal like decade in computers time, all right, in internet security time, to tell people of the actual issue they had went through. So ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a LastPass account, it might be time for you to look at a different password manager. I 100% believe you should, because based on how this hack has happened and their marketing that I've read, it really just feels like they never really had people's security in good hands. Period. Now, when it comes to password managers, typically I don't like using cloud-based services like LastPass because you're never 100% in control. If you know, if you can store your own password vaults on your local servers or your local computer, make a backup every once in a while, or keep it on your cell phone, that is always a better solution, in my opinion, than a cloud-based service where breaches happen like this, and even if you are using their service to ultimately protect yourself because a breach happened and they weren't careful, ultimately you're still put at risk at the end of the day. And it's wild whenever you have to rely on any security-based service that they end up having these massive security breaches. Now, again, if you live in a country, if you live in a region like the EU where you have GDPR laws, absolutely file a request form so you can get your data deleted off of their services. Because who knows if LastPass has truly cleaned up their act, but if you have the laws available to you, request a deletion. They have to follow those laws. And I believe some states in the US do allow this. I think the state of California actually has legislation for it. I'm not entirely sure, but if you can request deletion, do it. Also, the other big thing is just change your passwords, okay? Because at the end of the day, if your password vault has leaked out and somebody has cracked into it, well, everything inside there is 100% fucking compromised. And you got to go in and start changing those goddamn passwords 1,000,000%. Some people who use LastPass may not even have known this has happened. And unfortunately, it's up to you to keep vigilant, keep understanding of all of this, and change your passwords and keep your security in check. Because ultimately, that all pretty much relies on you. Every time this happens, it's a grim reminder that you can never trust anyone but yourself. So I was reading more into their website and looking at their zero knowledge security shit. One of the points is strong data encryption, right? Sensitive data is encrypted at the device level. So literally they're saying that it's encrypted on your device before it ever gets sent to their servers. Now, one GitHub that I was reading from a researcher that actually looked into their vault format, so they said overall structure of the vault. A LastPass vault consists of multiple data blocks, each with its own structure storing different types of information schematically. So of course, here's a quick breakdown of it. But one thing to look at is down over here, we can see it's structures of some type of composite data blocks. Note, only fields whose names are italicized are encrypted. All other fields are not encrypted. Okay, let's read what's not encrypted, okay? So aid, unique ID for the site secure note, that's not encrypted. Then you've got name, which is encrypted, folder, which is encrypted, so I assume that's done from the device. Notes encrypted, URL for secure field is HTTP, so that's not encrypted, even though that should also be encrypted no matter what. Anything related to location of where that password is used should have been encrypted. Then, of course, username is encrypted, password seems to be encrypted, require password reprompt, that's not encrypted, that's fine, that makes sense. Last used, auto login, disable autofill. I think what's really weird about this entire thing is why isn't it all necessarily completely encrypted anyways? Again, if we're going by this to be believed, like if I'm to believe everything in this situation, why, again, isn't everything not absolutely encrypted to begin with? If it's supposed to be encrypted at the device level, why is some of it encrypted and some of it isn't? It almost feels like it feels very disingenuous from their actual zero knowledge security. And I feel like I feel like the more layers that are going to get peeled back in this, the worse it's going to end up being. I really, really, really pray to God that even within the actual vault, all of the passwords and everything are super duper encrypted as the main thing is. That might be the only saving grace. But it scares the shit out of me that URLs aren't actually encrypted. Why that is the case, I don't know. But ladies and gentlemen, LastPass has a lot of stuff to say, and I know that this video may have been dry for some people, but I really want to stress on this point, okay? I'm ultimately making this because I believe in things like password managers. These are great tools to add an extra kick of security in your online practices. Unfortunately, it's been proven in some cases like LastPass, that you can't just trust any single app right off the case. But ultimately, if you are going to be on the internet, you need to have a different password for every single site you go to. And if you do use a password manager, I think one thing to learn is using cloud-based services like LastPass. You really do have to put the trust in them if they're actually keeping you safe and secure. Look, I go the extra mile and do everything on my own in terms of cloud storage solutions and passwords. Of course, that takes some maintenance and extra effort. But I think at the end of the day, it's worth it, because I'm not sitting here like the customers for LastPass who are wondering how compromised they have ended up being. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a wild day indeed, but if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.